The following program contains sexual content. Viewer discretion is advised. Today on an all-new Dr. Phil.
A fertility doctor who fathered nearly 70 children is warning his secret offspring to keep quiet.
He told me the world does not need to know.
He betrayed my mom and my dad's trust.
It's not just that he used his own specimen. On our mothers, he was known for using fresh specimens.
He violated 70 women, consequence, 0. Today's going to be a changing day in your life. You've never had anybody working harder to bring you to the threshold of change than right now. Well, question for you, how would you feel if you found out your mother's fertility doctor was actually your biological father? Well, I want you to listen very carefully to this audio of a fertility doctor who fathered nearly 70 children and is warning one of his secret offspring to keep quiet. Take a listen.
You're telling things that should be kept between me and you all. And what you're doing is that you're telling the world, and it will serve no good purpose.
No disrespect, but I feel like what you're telling me is to keep my life a secret.
No disrespect. That was a very generous statement. Well, Jacoba did not keep her life a secret. She's one of the nearly 70 children who was fathered by now disgraced former fertility doctor Donald Klein, who used his own samples on unwitting patients trying to conceive. Now, in the conversation you just heard, Klein was pleading with Jacoba to keep her mouth shut for the sake of his marriage and personal life. Now, if it was not for the advent of DNA technology, he may have gotten away with his secret. Take a look at this.
Their story starts at birth. All of their mothers, strangers then, went to Dr. Donald Klein. They found out 30 years later, Klein used his own sperm to impregnate the mothers and possibly others.
My mom was a 20-year-old girl. When she went to see Donald Klein, my mother completely trusted him. She was told that she was getting a medical resident and he was being used no more than 3 times. That's what she consented to. But instead, Klein used his own sperm without her consent. Late 2014, I took a DNA test, so I thought I would maybe find 1 or 2 half siblings. There were 8 of us. We asked the Attorney General to investigate. They subpoenaed my DNA as well as Donald Klein's DNA, and it was a 99.99997% match. Donald Klein was my biological father.
Well, Klein's family tree continued to grow as more and more of the children he fathered discovered the truth, including Matt, Amber, and Carrie.
My mom mentions over the years that she went to a fertility doctor, came across Klein's name in the article about who was being charged. Sure enough, it's a very uncanny resemblance.
I saw Jacoba and Matt on a local news story.
We all have a very unique story, and we do lean on each other to, get through it.
It's a Dr. Klein's name, and I knew that's the doctor that my parents went to. I turned my DNA test in. My test results came back positive that I was a Klein kid.
I got my DNA results about 7 months ago, and it confirmed that I have a lot of half siblings. A few of them reached out to me, and that's how relationships started.
When I first found out, there was only like 10 or 12 half-brothers and sisters.
I believe there's around 65 confirmed.
I expect the list to keep growing, and I don't think I will ever find every sibling.
I don't call Dr. Klein my biological father. I call him the doctor that violated my parents.
He betrayed my mom and my dad's trust and sexually assaulted my mom.
My mom considers this a form of rape.
You wake up every day and you wonder, am I a monster like him, even though you know you're not?
Many of Klein's children say the justice system failed them.
The 79-year-old pled guilty today to 2 counts of obstruction of justice. He will not be behind bars. Instead, the judge sentenced him to pay a $500 fine. Prosecutors filed charges after Klein lied to the Attorney General about using his own sperm to impregnate his patients. There is no official law against that in Indiana.
Dr. Klein just got a slap on the wrist. There was no punishment.
The punishment that he received was not for the acts of using his own sperm on our parents. His punishment was for the obstruction of justice. I honestly don't think he was just helping families have babies. I think there was something deeper in him that made him do this.
I think about it every day, what motivated Klein to do what he did. I don't know if it was money, if he had a God complex.
He has not shown any remorse. No apology, nothing.
I would like Dr. Klein to apologize to our moms and our dads.
Wow. How does it feel when you guys look at his face?
It's like looking into a stranger's eyes, but knowing that my DNA is his DNA, that I share his DNA.
Yeah. There is a bond with that man. There's not a history, but there is a bond because chromosomally, there are traits and characteristics that are transmitted.
It's scary because I do share his DNA. Am I going to be like him? Am I going to make those bad choices like he did?
How do y'all feel about it?
Makes me angry. It hurts really bad.
You know, I've known since I was about 15, almost 16, that my dad was not my biological father. And when I found out, I felt bad for him. And I pretty much never thought about it for the rest of, most of my life. And the day I saw this in the news and opened up an article and saw his picture, I immediately knew that I was going to be a part of this because he looked just like me.
Do you wonder, because of the geographical concentration, that you might be in a restaurant and somebody sitting at the table next to you might be a sibling?
Absolutely.
All the time.
And we discuss, all of us and our other siblings, I like to call it the trickle-down effect.
Right.
It's not even us meeting a sibling and the possibility that we may have dated one or married, but it's also our children. And not even just a cousin, but some of us have older children. So our children can meet aunt or an uncle, not just a cousin.
Right.
And I know when I go home up to Indiana to visit family and friends, I get anxiety going out in public. Because you look around and wonder, is that a sister or a brother?
And the more siblings that come out, the more we're having, I went to school with you, or I went to school with your cousin, and your cousin's my best friend. We lived 5 minutes away from each other growing up.
Yeah.
The more and more.
Sorry, I'm going to cry now. We lived 10 minutes from each other.
Growing up.
And had no idea.
No idea.
And even as tragic as this is, like, I could have had my sister this whole time.
Yeah. Wow. Coming up, Jacoba recorded more of her conversation with Klein because she was afraid for her safety. We're going to find out how he tried to use the Bible to persuade her to stay quiet.
When I met with Klein, he was very matter-of-fact, and the meeting was really bizarre. He showed up with a gun on his side. He told me that it was my fault, and I was ruining his life.
And later, how do you feel it's like that there was no penalty? He violated 70 women, consequence, 0.
Biggest concern for my children is as they get older and find someone that they want a long relationship with, it's going to end up being a cousin or an aunt, an uncle.
I have not really told my kids. 90% of us are central Indiana located. So meeting someone, are they going to have to say, did their parents go to Dr. Klein? Especially in this small Indiana community.
Well, Carrie, Jacoba, Matt, and Amber share half of their DNA with the disgraced fertility doctor, Donald Klein, who used his own specimen on unsuspecting women, and now the children are learning they have as many as 70 siblings, and it's pretty naive to think that it stops there, because some people don't know or maybe have chosen not to come forward. The multi-generational genetic consequences, if you think about them, are really endless. Jacoba confronted Klein at a restaurant about his actions, and he showed her really no remorse at all.
A few siblings did reach out to Dr. Klein and set up a meeting with him.
When I met with Klein, he was very matter-of-fact, and he knew at the time there was only 8 of us.
I did donor insemination over hundreds of people, and I only donated my own sample maybe 9 or 10 times. At the time, there was no sperm banks that I could refer the couples to.
The meeting was really bizarre. He showed up with a gun on his side, which I immediately thought was odd. Why would you show up to meet people that you think are probably your biological children in a public place?
He never really gave a straight answer. Told them that you should be proud that you're here and that you're alive, and I did exactly what your parents wanted me to do, which is not the truth.
I thought I was helping people that had no other recourse. I know that nothing happens without God allowing it. One of my favorite scriptures was Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you. No one is born as a mistake.
He told me that it was my fault, and he also told me that I was ruining his life and that his world would be over, and it needed to just stay a secret between us.
You felt no remorse from him other than just the fear of being caught.
He was not remorseful at all.
No.
He just did not want it to be public. He told me the world does not need to know.
Wow. And this really plays havoc with your ability to trust. Tell me what you say to yourself about this.
Before this, I've had a hard time with feeling like I'm good enough or worthy enough, or if I'm going to be accepted. And since finding this out, it's brought all that back up to the surface. I was sexually assaulted when I was 16 years old. And knowing now that my mom was violated in such a way, that's how I've connected those.
I mean, there's nothing more intimate in a woman's life than becoming pregnant. And, you know, we've got laws and procedures and policies for a variety of things in life because those things happen. But this is on a different level.
And let's not forget, too, that not only there's some of us that were supposed to be from donor sperm, we also have siblings who were supposed to be from their father. And instead, he used his own sperm on their mother.
I don't think people understand one of the reasons why this is such horrific an experience is it's not just that he used his own sperm on our mothers, is that he was known for using fresh specimens on his patients. That's why he had such a successful business in practice, is because he didn't use frozen specimens. He used fresh.
Dr. Klein made another family believe they were in good hands. We're going to find out how deep his betrayal goes next.
I'm struggling really. This consumes me every day. There's like days where I don't even want to get out of bed. I used to be really outgoing and talkative, and now I just want to be by myself.
And later,
I went into this situation thinking my husband was the father of Julie, and then to find out 37 years later that the doctor was really my daughter's father, it really hurt all of us.
I absolutely see similarities in the siblings that I meet.
We all have the same cheekbones, same chin, and we all smile the same way.
We talk the same, we stand the same, we like the same music, we like the same food, we finish each other's sentences.
Well, Carrie just confirmed this spring that she shared the same bio dad as Jacoba, Matt, and Amber. Now, she says there are members of her family and close friends who do not know she's one of the secret children of Klein. So people are learning this for the first time now.
My dad's only told 2 family members.
I mean, cat's out of the bag
Yeah,
today.
definitely.
Because if you count them, there's like 7 cameras around here. You haven't noticed. So you might want to call some people on your way home.
I plan on it.
Why did you decide to go public with it now? I'm so glad you did, because I think it's good. I think it's very cathartic to talk about this, because you have absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. And if perpetrators can get victims to feel shame and stand in the shadows, then they have power over you.
Well, I think at first he did have that control over me to where I wanted to keep it a secret. I was afraid I wasn't going to get support, and I was scared. But it's been so hard the past 7 months. Like, I almost feel like I'm living a double life, like a secret life. And I can't do it anymore.
Nor should you. How do you feel about it being known?
I told Jacoba on that first phone call, I don't want to be public. I'm not ready. I will support you guys and gals in getting a law passed in our state, but I can't do that to my dad. I mean, my dad knows that he's not my dad, but I can't put him through that. But after a couple of months, my mom's sister convinced her to talk to my dad. And amazingly, he was more concerned. I shouldn't say amazingly, it's my dad. He was more concerned about my mom's well-being and my well-being than his. And I told him, I said, I'm going public. I'm going to fight with my brothers and sisters to get this out there so people know what he has done, because I wouldn't be the little girl that you raised if I didn't. Every day he put on his police uniform or firefighter's uniform, he taught me that you stand up for what's right and wrong. You stand up for the people that don't have a voice.
How about you? Was it difficult to go public?
It was at first, because when it was a smaller group of us, they did not want to be public. They were really worried that I would expose their name. So not only did I lose those siblings for a while that I had bonded with, I was by myself. But I knew it was something I had to do.
He virtually had no criminal penalty for this at all. He got some probation for obstruction of justice.
Yes, correct.
Just for lying, right?
Correct.
But nothing for the actual act of doing what he did. And having spent most of my professional career in the litigation arena, I found that mind-boggling.
For me, in my late 20s, when my wife and I tried to start having a family, I too learned that I was not able to have children. So before learning about Klein being my biological father, my wife and I went through that whole process. And, you know, it was months and months of failure after failure, and just we broke down in tears, and the financial investment. And eventually, you know, we went all the way to doing IVF, using donor sperm. My kids were born in 2011, 2014. That's not that long ago, really. And, you know, we joked once or twice because we never had any tangible hold of the donation of the sperm. And to find out now that someone would just blatantly take it upon themselves to use their position as a physician to put material that a woman did not consent to, reproductive material, inside of them, there's nothing really more violating than that.
But how do you feel in the fact that there's no penalty? Because if you look at it right now and said, here's this guy that did this. He violated 70 women. Let's just assume, we'll use that number because it's a working current hypothesis number. Right. And violated 70 women, consequence, zero. That's how it writes out, zero.
It makes me very angry. And that's another thing that ties to my past trauma. Because when I was violated as a teenager, there was no justice for that either. Mm-hmm. So that part of it really affected me too. Mm-hmm. Makes me sick to my stomach. It makes me angry. I feel like I don't matter. It's just all those feelings all over again.
And of course, their explanation for it is that there was no law specific to this specific crime, because nobody thought, what person would do that? Julie is another biological child of Dr. Klein. For years, her family thought that Klein used her father's sample. She says her dad was devastated, and her mom, Diana, says she doesn't speak about the issue with her husband since the news broke. Now, Julia and Diana are joining us via Skype. As a mother that this happened to, do you feel like you were criminally victimized?
Well, yes, I do feel like we were criminally victimized. I went into this situation thinking my husband was the father of Julie, and then to find out 37 years later that the doctor was really my daughter's father, it really hurt all of us.
Right. And Julie, how has this affected you when you learned about it, and how did you learn about it?
I found out in October of 2016 after watching a news program. My parents had always told me who their fertility doctor was, and after I saw it on the news, I just had this gut feeling that I was a part of this. I had reached out to Jacoba and asked her some questions. She didn't really think at that time maybe I could have been a part of this because I was always supposed to have been from my father. Mm-hmm. But suggested I take a DNA test, and if it was positive, her name would show up. And that's exactly what I did.
And there it was.
And there it was. I was number 11.
Right. Well, take me through the moment that you looked down that list and saw that name, and it confirmed it for you.
I was actually, I'm a nurse, and I was at work. And I got the notification on my phone through an email that my results are in. Not thinking anything about it, I just pulled it up on the computer at work. And I saw all these names as half siblings, and I thought, wow. And then it crossed my mind that I have an adopted brother, and I shouldn't have any siblings, DNA related to me. So at that moment, I completely lost my identity and who I've always known myself to be.
So, Diana, what was your reaction to this?
Well, when my daughter called me at work and explained to me that her DNA had come back saying she was the daughter of Dr. Klein, we both cried on the phone. And then right after that, I immediately thought, okay, how am I going to tell her dad? And it took me about a week to kind of get my thoughts straight as to how I was going to tell him. And so one night we were sitting in the living room of our home, and I kind of casually said, you know, the story that was on the news the other night, and I was telling you about it, that Dr. Klein had used his own sperm to impregnate us mothers. Well, I said, Julie is one of his children. And my husband turned to me and he said, "This has taken everything away from me." It was really bad. And we kind of just sat there for a while, and he said this, he was afraid that well, for one thing, Julie would feel differently about him. He also felt like our grandkids would feel differently about him. But I tried to assure him that Julie was always going to be his daughter, and his grandkids was always going to be his grandkids. To this day, we don't say much about it. I talk to him occasionally, but I just don't want to hurt him because it really did hurt him badly.
Julie, do you feel any differently about your father?
I don't. That man would give his life for me. I'm always going to be his little girl. But it doesn't take away the pain.
You're blessed to have this wonderful family and this wonderful bond, but it shouldn't have to be tested like that. That's the whole point. So coming up, Dr. Klein isn't the only one who betrayed the trust of his patients. We're going to meet a woman whose mother went in to see a different doctor for cramps and came out pregnant. We'll be right back.
5 years ago, I did a commercial DNA test. I started to see people with the last name of Davis popping up as matches. I realized that my mom's OBGYN was my biological dad. His name is Dr. Gary Davis. I felt like my mom had been violated. I'm really angry about it.
Dr. Donald Klein used his own sperm to impregnate patients dozens of times. He was given a 1-year suspended sentence because prosecutors said there was no law on the books specifically making fertility fraud a crime.
I would like a federal law banning what Dr. Klein did.
I do want to see the law change.
I do not think justice was served.
When people abuse the system, we need to regulate those actions.
Most of the mothers and most of the siblings do consider this a form of medical rape. We need to protect women.
Well, unfortunately, Carrie, Jacoba, Matt, Amber, and the rest of their nearly 70 siblings, fathered by fertility doctor Donald Klein, former fertility doctor Donald Klein, are not the only victims of this type of DNA disaster. Rendy's world was rocked when she started to look into her family tree.
My mom in 1982 was having some problems, and she went to her OBGYN, and he told her that she needed to have a hysterectomy, and she was like, "Oh, I can't have a hysterectomy because I want to have a family." And he said, "If you want to have a family, you should consider donor insemination." I always knew that my mom had used an anonymous donor to conceive me, but it didn't feel like I had access to answers. 5 years ago, I did a commercial DNA test to find out more about my heritage. I started to see people with the last name of Davis popping up as matches. I thought that my mom's OBGYN's last name was Davis, and as the matches became more and more frequent, I realized that my mom's OBGYN was my biological dad. His name is Dr. Gary Davis. It changed the narrative of the whole story that I had believed my whole life growing up. I felt like my mom had been violated. I do think it's wrong. Since doing the DNA testing on multiple sites, I've connected with 2 half-siblings that are also children of Dr. Davis. I did not personally make contact with Dr. Davis, but I worked with a reporter for the New York Times who was running a story on this issue, and she contacted him. He answered the phone, and he said, "That's interesting. I'll have to look into that." And then he hung up on her. He died of a heart attack 4 days after having that conversation with her. He was never really forced to confront this, and that's frustrating. It's been incredibly hard to process and accept the idea that my mom's OBGYN is my biological father. I've had this really consistent self-doubt the entire time. I'm really angry about it.
Well, Rendy, thanks for joining us. You've been listening to everything we've been talking about so far. You can relate to every bit of it, right?
Yeah, it's the same story. Same story, different doctor.
Yeah. And you were really cheated out of the opportunity to at least do what you got to ask some questions. You got to at least have some confrontation.
Yes.
You guys got to see him held at least to public scrutiny, to at least be outed. Your guy had the audacity to die before he had to face the music, right?
Yeah, I think facing the music might have killed him.
Yeah.
I had a few years that I knew about it and just was so scared to come forward, and I went back and forth over whether or not I should speak out. And then the moment that I did, he passed away.
Mm-hmm. And your mother, at this point, unfortunately, suffers from dementia, correct? But she did have a moment of clarity about this. You talked to her about it. What did she say?
Yeah, I mean, when I first talked to her about it, it was hard for her to understand at first. I think it's just such a shocking thing to hear. But as I was explaining it, the first thing she said was, wait a minute, he's at least a foot shorter than the guy I picked. But she does feel like she was violated, and she calls it the bait and switch. Yeah. Where she feels like she was told one thing, and he really encouraged her to go ahead with this procedure to, have a child on her own. And then the whole time may have known that he was planning on using his own sperm instead of the donor that she picked.
Well, I have a question for all of you, and I guess it's kind of a yes or no question. Are you glad you found out, or would you rather have never known? Well, I have a question for all of you, and I guess it's kind of a yes or no question. Are you glad you found out, or would you rather have never known?
I'm glad I found out. It's hard to face it every day. There's days when I don't want to get out of bed, and I think, why in the hell am I here? But at the same time, hopefully we can all make a difference, and I'm blessed with my siblings.
I found out that my dad wasn't my dad the same time I found out about this story this year. And I'm just glad I have the opportunity to look at my dad and tell him that I still love him the same and that it's okay.
Are you glad you know?
I'm going to be a bit chicken and say, I wish I didn't know. Yeah. It's just...
and that's a fair response. I mean...
It's been really hard, and I don't think I know myself any better from knowing this. It's just created a lot of hard feelings, I think, and I'd do without that for sure.
Yeah. How about you?
I'm glad I know, but I wish my parents didn't have to know. To see the heartbreak of my mom, seeing her, every time we talk about this, her having to relive her violation over and over again, and knowing that she wasn't the only one that got violated. That's what hurts me, is I don't like to see her going through this.
Just like Amber said, it's tough to go through and see our mother's reactions. I think they get lost sometimes because the children are more vocal. First and foremost, the mothers of the victims, and they are struggling with it.
Yeah, and Diana, you're the only mother here. Are you glad you know, or would you rather have not found out?
Well, I'm glad that we know, particularly for my grandkids, to make sure that we help them along their growing up years, to make sure that they don't fall in love with a cousin, or, like Jacoba said, an aunt or an uncle or whatever. Right. And I'm glad to be here to help my daughter through this. It's been a real struggle for the two of us, real struggle with my husband. She may have found out when I wasn't here. Right. And it's been a blessing for that.
Yeah. Julie, are you glad that you know, or would you rather have never found out?
I'm kind of half and half. I still revert to wanting to protect my family that I've grown up with. But then I have all these siblings that I'm so very thankful for.
Right. Well, coming up, my guests have asked why it's so hard to move on with their lives. I'm going to address that right after the break. My dad used to say to me, if he said it once, he said it 100 times. He said, boy, you better spend 5% of your time deciding whether the deal you've got is a good deal or a bad deal, and 95% of your time deciding what you're going to do about it. And really, that's the truth. You need to spend a little bit of time deciding whether life has dealt you a fair deal or an unfair deal. But then you need to quickly decide, that is the reality. What am I going to do about it? Not even God can change what has happened. That has happened. The question is now, as adults, how are you going to accommodate that? And I will be damned if I would ever settle for allowing that man to dictate the quality of my emotional life going forward. You can't give him that power. You've got to cut those strings and say, you will not control me. You may have violated me, you may have violated my mother, you may have violated my father, but you will not control me going forward. I will take my power back if it is the last thing I do. I will not let you control me. And I think all of you should have someone to talk to about this in private. There's a company called Doctor on Demand. That's actually our company. My son, Jay, founded this company. It is a company where you download an app and you're able to speak to medical doctors or therapists at home just by making an appointment. And it's interesting, all the research tells us that it is at least as effective as seeing someone in person. They say at least as effective because people tend to be more candid when they're able to speak that way. And I'm going to arrange for every one of you to have the opportunity to do that, however long is necessary for you to be able to get guidance in how to handle this and get some help. And I'm going to set that up starting tomorrow. So you can do that right away. All right. And if you at home want to have your own Doctor on Demand, you just have to go to Google Play Store, iTunes App Store, and download the Doctor on Demand app. So please know that you deserve to untangle all of this. Don't let this man control you going forward. And thank you for having the willingness and courage to come here and talk about this. You've saved a lot of people some hell today. Okay. I want to thank my guests today, and if you'd like to share your thoughts about this topic, and I know you do, and you want to help establish a federal law against this fertility fraud, go to drphil.com. We'll have more information there on how you can join the movement to get this done. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. One of my Twitter followers, Allegra, tweeted, "It's been a really long day. I'm just glad to get to the end by watching a new episode of Dr. Phil." Well, thanks. And who knows, I might share your comment next. And don't forget to check out my Fill in the Blanks podcast, where I've started a series called Relationship Reality Check. We talk about your relationship with you, because that's the most important relationship you'll ever have. And if you're not getting along with you, you're not going to get along with anybody. Take a look. You're going to like this. Now, that's what's out right now, and I've got a brand new one dropping tomorrow. And in that one, we start talking about how to engage this world in a way that you want them to support you. This is a brand new series that comes out every Tuesday. It's free. It's available on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, CastBox, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. We'll see you next time.